Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. Today's guest is Sam Huber from the Philadelphia area. Sam is an enthusiastic fan who picked a show where the crowd energy just seeps through the audience recording. July 5th, 2013 at SPAC in Saratoga Springs, New York. A few themes come up repeatedly in today's conversation. First, how special SPAC is as a venue. It's peacefully surrounded by trees that seem to have an effect on the energy and the vibes of any given show. We talk about the idea of the band messing with the fan base by playing certain songs at certain places in the setlist, especially debuts, and also how getting in the car unprepared can lead you to the greatest of adventures. On top of that, there's also the main idea that SPAC is a family gathering, a homecoming on the East Coast. Although it's just a few hours from New York City and Madison Square Garden, SPAC carries that reputation of being the summer home for Deadheads and Phish fans. Although this was not his first show, July 5th, Sam was ready to be received by the community at this legendary state park. So let's join Sam to talk about the reaction to Energy, when the band will break open Yarmouth Road, and more as we discuss Phish's show from July 5th, 2013 at SPAC. Just a note about today's recording, there are a few audio glitches toward the beginning of the conversation, but they stop at about the halfway mark. Enjoy. Sam, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you. You're here today to talk about a really great show, a show that was at the very beginning of the summer tour of 2013. We're talking about July 5th, 2013 in Saratoga, which was during a summer that was kind of wild, not necessarily because of the band's music, but because of the atmosphere and the weather, at least as I remember it. But it's a great show, and it's at a venue that I think is on the checklist of a lot of fans. So I can't wait to hear about your perception of it and your memories of it going back about 10 years already. Can you believe that? 2013 is already 10 years.
That's just insane to me because it just seems like just yesterday I was there dancing to the show. So it was just a crazy experience. I can't believe it's already been 10 years.
Yeah, before we get to it though, let's get to know you as a fan with the Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
So Sam, when was your first Phish show?
My first Phish show was 2011 in Camden, New Jersey with my dad. Check it out, folks. The first set is a barn burner. It just the band just burns it down the first set for that show. I've been going for a while. My last show was 2017. I've been raising a family, so I've been occupied with that. But I'm hoping to get back to going to shows soon. Hopefully the Phish will come near me during the weekend sometime soon.
Was one of those shows in 2017 the most recent one? Was that during the Baker's Dozen or one of the other shows?
It was one of the other, maybe in 2016. It was in Philadelphia at the Man.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 2016. Actually, now that I think about it, wow, has it been that long? Oh, it's been a while. I didn't realize that it's been a while since I've gone fishing.
Was it the one where they played "Waking Up Dead," like a lot of big boat songs? Because I was at those two shows. Do you remember those?
Yeah. It was during the big boat tour. They stuck to the classics during my shows, though. I mean, the album's not too bad, and it definitely has potential. I think for future jams, they haven't gone there yet.
Yeah,
with those songs.
I agree. Aside from Phish, which band do you think you've probably seen live the most number of times?
I would say either Dark Star Orchestra or Alice Cooper. Those are the ones that are high up on the list. Because Dark Star Orchestra would always come to the Electric Factory for years, two nights at the end of every year, and that was always my tradition to go see them. Because unfortunately, I was born after Jerry passed, so this is the closest I've gotten. I mean, I saw Dead Company 3 times, but I always made it a point to see Dark Star because that was my first, real jam show that I went to, and really started the whole thing off for me.
During a Dark Star Orchestra show, are you trying to narrow down what show are they playing when you're singing, or do you just there for the fun?
I don't know. I'm one of those deadheads that's like, okay, the tone of the guitar, the way the set list is flowing, what year, and I'm one of the ones that likes to guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I pride myself when I get it right at a Dark Star show. Though I do like that they're finally making up their own set list because you're starting to see every era of the Dead melded together into one show. So it's a little less predictable because I've been listening to the Dead since I was 15. So it's like, I know how I want to be surprised when all of a sudden like Athena appears after Darkstar, or just something weird and unusual. That's always refreshing.
I'm getting the vibe just from the different venues you're talking about that you grew up or used to live or maybe still do in the Philadelphia area, right?
Yeah, I grew up around the Philadelphia area. That's where most of my shows that I have gone to over the years have been. The year for the show that we're talking about for this podcast, like Phish was not coming anywhere near my area. I'm like, I'm not missing the boys from Vermont. Like before I had a family of my own, like no matter where I had to go, I would have to go see them. So the closest one was SPAC that year, and so I figured out a bus route from Philadelphia all the way up to SPAC. It was my first time really getting on the bus, as a Deadhead would say, and it was just a wild. I met some amazing Phish heads in the campgrounds near there. All I had was 2 bottles of wine and wheat thins. That's all I could carry because I had camping gear and stuff. And Phish heads, like Deadheads, are so kind. Like they feed me burgers off the grill. We had beers. And we just chatted about our love of the band. And SPAC just turned out to be one of the most magical venues I've ever been to. Because if you've ever been there, the trees line the back of the venue, and you could just feel off the band like this is a homecoming gig. So they were just all giddy, and when I think the boys are in a good mood. It just creates this special atmosphere when they're really gelling, and you could feel the vibrations flying off the trees. And it was just a very special experience in my life, and definitely up there in my top. I've been to 9 Phish shows, and they're definitely at the top of the list of the best ones.
All else being equal, what is your favorite Philadelphia area venue?
I love the Man the most because it's just open grass field. You get a great view of the city. The acoustics are really good, and I just like I have fond memories of just laying down on the grass. And like one year I got this 25-minute fuego, and I remember just laying in the grass and getting lost in the jam, and it was just such bliss. And then it was like coming out of the rabbit hole. All of a sudden, like we're back in reality, and they go into something more fast-paced. I'm like, are we still on the same song? And all of us just realizing, wow, that was a long one. And it's just a very special place. If you come to Philly to see a Phish show, pray that it's at the Man, because the Camden venue, while it has also grass area, it's harder to get to, and Camden's not always the safest place, especially after a Phish show. And you do the Phish thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would recommend going to see them at the Man because it just has the right vibe.
What is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show?
I would say the weirdest thing I've ever seen at a Phish show is it was one of the Man shows. So like a group of I guess college kids came dressed as like Pokemon, and they're like these inflatable costumes. So no, I'm in the middle of jam, and also I look right, and there's like just a sea of like Pokemon. I'm like, did I drink something? And I reached out and touched them. Okay, these people are really here, and it was just weird. I guess they somehow inflated their costumes within the venue because they weren't there when the show started, and they had a giant like Pokeball volleyball bouncing around. And I mean, even at the SPAC venue, like seeing all the what are they called? Just the people throwing up light material like
glow sticks.
I won't glow sticks. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. And it just was a sea of color. And I think the weirdest thing about Phish is like how they change the music changes the texture of the air around you while it's going on. And always the vibe of the crowd is always the weirdest thing, but a good kind of weird. Like,
when was this show played?
So let's take a look at summer 2013. This show was played on July 5th, 2013. This was the second show of the tour. Looking back at it, the summer tour was announced by a video that parodied Apocalypse Now, right? With Fishman in the Martin Sheen role, where he woke up with a voiceover. And in this abandoned room, I think there's a camera shot from above a fan, like a light fan. And it was the trendy tradition of announcing tours with videos, which they kind of haven't done since, I think, the Baker's Dozen. I think that was the last one with the giant donut rolling through Manhattan. Yeah. But in terms of geography, looking back as kind of like a Google Maps tour route, it began in the Northeast. There was shows in Maine, Toronto, Saratoga, Homedale, Jones Beach, Meriwether Post. And then they just kind of dipped down into Alpharetta, into the Southeast. The entire Midwest, in quotes, Midwest leg was just 3 shows at Northerly Island in Chicago. And then after Chicago, there was a 5-day break before it picked up again at the Gorge. So now we're firmly on the West Coast. Tahoe, which featured the now famous Tahoe Tweezer, Bill Graham, I think 3 shows at the Bill Graham in San Francisco, a show at the Hollywood Bowl, and then, of course, Dick's at the end, which was only, I think, the second year of Dick's. So this wasn't yet really a fully established tradition. So I remember going to just a couple shows. I had recently bought a house in the summer of 2013. So for once, my financial priority was not Phish Summer Tour. I went to Homedale and Wantagh. Jones Beach, that is. And I just remember 2 strong impressions of this show from my personal experience. First, the weather for at least the first half before they went to the West Coast. The weather was just horrendous. I remember at the shows I went to, Jones Beach and Homedale, it was humid and muggy. There was no wind. There was no breeze. At Jones Beach, it was still the worst weather I've ever been to, and that includes Coventry. It was like torrential, cold wind and rain, just sideways rain. At Jones Beach. If you were there, I still probably haven't dried off. I think Toronto was postponed due to flooding, and Northerly Island had this crazy weather debacle where night 1 was aborted because there was like predicted horrible storms, and then there was a 3-set second night, and then Harpua, which has nothing to do with the weather, but Harpua on night 3, that is still, I think, generally seen as one of the worst versions they've ever played with Second City. The second impression that I remember was the big jamming and the frequent bliss jams where they would go up to major keys in the middle of a jam. Like, it would be wrong, like I said before, to not mention at least twice that this was the Tahoe Tweezer tour. Homedale, Cross-Eyed and Painless is a big highlight. Energy, the song that we're going to talk about today from the Apples in Stereo, debuted this tour. The first night at Bill Graham had a whole bunch of highlights. And I remember that this summer and this tour was being hailed as one of the best tours of 3.0 before it was even over. So where were you and who were you as a person in the summer of 2013 that led you to this show at SPAC?
Well, I was a recent graduate of college. Like probably most people, I discovered Phish in college in a dorm room. This guy, check out this weird band from Vermont, and I've been hooked ever since. So, I got my first job as a TA, and it was, listening to show after show, and like, I was just an avid fan. So I'm like, I said, the tour was announced. I'm like, there's nowhere close to Philadelphia. The closest one to me was SPAC. And I'm like, all right, let me Google how to get there. And I'm like, and it was a 3-hour bus ride. And, I've read enough Deadhead stories of people traveling miles and miles. I'm like, here's my chance to experience that. So I hopped on, 3 buses, spent what money I had to get there, arrive, and I'm not an expert tent pitcher. Someone helps me pitch up my tent. Like I said, all I had was 2 bottles of wine and wheat thins. Just met the nicest post other kids that just left college, and they shared their food, and we shared our Phish stories that we had up to that point, and we went on this show. It was like basically a party bus from the campgrounds to the show, and I just wanted to experience a homecoming gig from the boys, and they certainly delivered. I stayed the first 2 shows. I had to go back. I missed the 3rd show because I had to go back for work. But those first 2 shows, it was just a mind-blowing experience that I just felt like this is what Deadheads must have experienced when the Dead played at SPAC, and it was just a beautiful experience, and it was just a sense of community. Like, the biggest thing that stands out in my memory was a sense of community that like there are people from California coming all the way to SPAC. Like we come every year. And like and it really solidified like there's something special about this band. Like I was a big Phish fan, but now I'm like after that experience, it was a mega Phish fan. Like I have hundreds of shows saved on my computer, and that experience is just very special.
So that was going to be my next question about why you have attendance bias toward this show. What made this one different from the other one that you went to in this weekend?
The second show was, good. Like, I still love listening to it, but this show, like, I just felt like first set, Paige was on fire on the keys. The second set, the jams weren't, 20, 30 minutes long. Like, the band just, they seem to be just communicating on another level. And then that steam just, like, we were all, like, the whole audience, I remember, like, it being extremely hot. And then it's almost like the music itself cooled us all down, especially with the steam effects going off. And there's just, like, such happiness radiating from, the boys. From, even though I was in the way back, you could feel this joy, like, radiating from that. And, in the 9 shows I've gone to, I could feel them being happy, but, like, there's an extra sense of joy that emanated from this show.
Set 1.
Well, let's break it down. They opened the first set with Kill Devil Falls, which was very common for the day as an opener.
Mm-hmm.
I could hear it, and maybe I was wrong because I'm only listening through the recording, but the audience doesn't give much of a reaction to hearing it when it begins. I have a feeling, because I've been to SPAC a number of times, that people were still filtering in. It always takes forever to get into SPAC, especially if you're on the lawn. But by the end of the song, by about 6.5 minutes, the jam has reached what I can only describe as a fever pitch, where the whole band has kind of elevated and it's a huge rock and roll party. Were you on the lawn for this show?
Yeah, I was on the lawn. Like, I'm always a person to make sure I am there before the first note. Like, I've never been late to a Phish show. Yeah, like people are still filtering in for Kill Devil Falls, but like the energy was just great because, like, yeah, like you said, that around the 6 minute mark, the band reached this pitch, and like I think everyone was starting to feel it, and then it's the show started getting this more reggae type feel to it, and like Mike started like thumping these big, bass bombs that just really started getting the crowd grooving because everyone was just standing around during Kill Devil Falls just listening, and all of a sudden Mike starts hitting with these high note bass notes that just really start get people moving, and then Paige comes in as you hear, and like, okay, we're in for something here. You start getting that feeling towards the end of Falls.
Yeah, and speaking of Mike really dropping it, the second song is the Moma Dance, which is a little slower than usual, but it's always, in my opinion, I've said this before on the show, the perfect two-hitter. It's always like the perfect song to play after the opener revs everyone up. If you haven't gotten to your seat or your spot on the lawn yet, the Moma Dance is when to do it. And it's a little longer than usual. I really like the funkiness of it.
Yeah, like I do remember the funkiness, like, and everyone getting really exciting for dance, like, because Mike, I think signaled with his bass for the band to slow it down. It's like I remember feeling almost like he's reading. Oh, they're still coming in. Let's slow it down so everyone has time to find their seat. Because there are other versions of dance where the funkiness is much quicker, but it was almost like the band was reading off that, in my opinion. Like, okay, people are still coming in. Let's slow it down so people can enjoy the show, and then and it's like the next song they start picking up the speed again and like really like you said, getting into this real rock show.
Yeah, that next song is Sample in a Jar. Starting the show, this is when I was first listening to it, began to kind of get this pattern that it's starting the show with a lot of like type 1 ragers. Like SPAC, given the right the last time I was there, just for context, was 2004. So the last time I was there, it was a real disorganized mess. And the venue can be a big mess, given the right or wrong circumstances. So to me, listening, it made sense for the band to play a lot of songs for people to kind of find their space or find their seats, because you're not going to miss anything unpredictable in these first 3 songs. But again, something I noticed that was a little different, this guitar solo in this Sample in a Jar is a little softer than usual. It's almost like they're starting low to build a lot higher.
Yeah, that's one thing I love about Phish. There's some times where they start a set off, like I think to throw off the audience intentionally, like, oh, this is just a standard Phish show, and then all of a sudden they'll throw something in the middle that, like, oh my god, I can't believe we're getting this. And like, the band just has a great sense of humor that is communicated through how they play their solos. Like in recent years they've slowed down Llama a lot, and then all of a sudden, like 5 shows later, they'll speed it up again. And that's one thing I just love about this band. They love fucking with us. And that's how I remember thinking that after the first 3 songs of this show, like, okay, this feels pretty standard. Like, there's nothing. And all of a sudden, that like 4th song in, they throw curveball at us, and then like, okay, and I see, and then Paige starts going off, and okay, and then the party really starts getting going.
And then to kind of capitalize on all this energy they just built with Sample in a Jar, the next song is Roses Are Free, which I wrote down as more of the same, just great party sing-along. And to me, this is what SPAC feels like. It's like you're surrounded by so many people, everyone can sing, everyone can scream the lyrics, and yet you're still able to hear the band. It just seemed like a big party on the recording. How did you feel at this point? Like, I know you were in your spot. Were you just swept up, or were you still getting used to being at the show?
I was grooving by this point. Like the energy that, like you said, everyone can be singing, but you still clearly hear the band. Because the advantage of Spock is that no matter where you are in the venue, the acoustics are amazing, thanks to the trees enclosing the sound. But at this point, I'm grooving and doing the hippie dance and just really feeling the vibe, and appreciating the band easing us into this first night, and then surprising us with Roses Are Free, which I wasn't that familiar with, but just the fact that everyone was just so happy, like I was feeding off that joy again, like I talked about earlier, that joy of we're gonna have a good party tonight.
And that's something that I loved about listening to the show, and I'm so glad that you chose it. You could hear that. You keep talking about the joy and the feeling, and it's, even though I wasn't there, you could feel it. You could almost hear the feeling through the speakers, through my headphones. And it's a real case of, the title of this podcast, Attendance Bias, it feels like you're there. And guys like me who are big fans of jams and big improv, there isn't any yet. We're still only 4 or 5 songs into the first set, but you could feel how it felt to be there. And the next song really kicks it up, Birds of a Feather, which when I was listening to this track, I was grading papers. It was the end of the school year. And it was, I thought, first opportunity for jamming, because I love Birds of a Feather. And you could hear by like 4.5 minutes, there's real connections, especially between Trey and Fishman, and the whole band is just hanging on to that main theme. It's a really excellent tight version. It's not that long. It's only like 7.5 minutes or so, but a lot goes down during it. And then at the end, Page thanks Ian from Ian's Farm. Ian McLean is there. So you kind of have that you mentioned hometown or homecoming feeling earlier. There really is some like Phish lore in attendance.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing is like you don't need a jam to be 20 minutes. It's just the fact that the boys are feeding off each other, and like I remember the audience like recognizing that, and then they would get louder and more a happy frenzy dance, recognizing the boys are vibing off each other. Because I've been to some shows where like maybe Fishman and Trey are really going off, but Mike and Paige are off somewhere else. But you start to feel like all four of them are on the same page, and that's the big thing about Birds. It's always, I think, about every time I hear it, it's about the band getting on the same page because the name, title, and I just remember, like Trey would do a little something, and then Fishman would do something, then Mike would do something, and then Paige would open up with some big keys, and I just remember that Birds being a lot of fun.
After Birds of a Feather wraps up very tightly, there's a long pause where the band acknowledges Ian McLean, and then it's the debut of Yarmouth Road. I wrote that it still hasn't quite found its place in the Phish lineup. There are people who love it, and then there are people where it's like, finally, time to go to the bathroom. On that spectrum, where do you lie when it comes to Yarmouth Road?
With that song, luckily I've been listening to a lot of reggae recently. I remember this, like I was listening to a lot of Marley and Ziggy, like all sorts of reggae at the time. So like it was a very welcome reggae. Like I didn't know the song, so I just was focused on what the band was feeling, which was joy radiating from Mike during that song. Like you could tell, like he loves this little tune that I think he just wrote at the time, and I was just dancing off his emotions during that, and the master of his bass lines, like really feeling it's all about that bass. That's what I was about during that song, and I enjoyed it, and like I was hoping that they would take it into jam territory too, and just really go out there like they sometimes do on Policeman. But I was happy with the 5 to 6 minutes that I enjoyed it.
Good, yeah. I think it's growing on me a bit. I still don't know if Mike has the vocal authority to hit what he wrote. Kind of like Trey sometimes with certain songs that were written in 1989. He doesn't quite have the dexterity to play what he wrote for himself. But the song as a whole, I think is pretty good. But I don't know. I don't think the crowd generally, the Phish audience, has really responded as well to it. But that's just one man's opinion. But after that,
well, I think the thing is, anytime there's any new songs, especially people that grew up in 1.0, like every time they hear a new song, they get upset because they just want to live in 1.0. And I'm like, you want a band to evolve because, like the Dead, there are people that love the early 60s Primal Dead, like this early 70s. And it depends on what mood you're in. And if you look at each 0.0 as a different mood you want to be in, like the new songs, you can enjoy the new songs. I want fans to open their minds to these new songs, especially. I know as soon as one of these new songs gets like a 20-30 minute version, they're gonna fall in love with that song. They need a good version of it. Like people I remember reading weren't crazy about Ghost because it was just, and then all of a sudden they open up with a 20-minute version, and then all of a sudden I love, like I've had Phish heads tell me. Then all of a sudden I fell in love with this song after that 20-minute version, and that's just, I think, what we have to wait for when it comes to songs like Road is. We have to wait for that special version to unite the fans over that song.
Yeah, I agree. It just takes one to crack open. But one that's been cracked open many, many times over was next with Bathtub Gin, which my first thought when they started playing it, because I don't look at the set list while I'm listening for the first time, is that my first thought was this could really do some damage after they showed us what they could do with really good Birds of a Feather. I thought that, all right, this could, a song that does usually serve as an improv springboard, this has the capability of doing it. And it is smooth and grooving. There was a lot of crowd chatter that I noticed on this recording, I guess. But then, like you mentioned, I forget what song earlier, it might have been Kill Devil Falls, that there's this crowd swell at about 8 minutes. Like everyone just collectively felt this energy and started cheering, even though there wasn't anything particularly unique going on from the stage. But everyone just starts really cheering at about 8 minutes. And then it catches fire like every minute for the next three, from like 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes. It's like the band just keeps leveling up. And everything just builds and builds. And this is really what my heart leaps out at. Even though they're not leaving type 1, like you could always tell it's from Bathtub Gin, it kind of doesn't matter. In this case, it's kind of feeling that what you keep coming back to, that joy is infectious during this not really short, but not really extensively explorative Bathtub Gin either. It's just beautiful. And I got the feelings in my chest during this one. For me, this was the highlight of the set so far.
Yeah, and I think what it was is that we could tell that was the band winking at us as it was building those last like 3 to 4 minutes, and so we're it was like we're just us throwing love back at each other between us and the band, because it would be like we'd cheer and then all of a sudden they would go up 3 keys. We cheer, they go up even further. So it's like we were egging the band on, and most other rock bands, like the lead singer holds out the mic to the audience, but I'm sure you've experienced with Phish, they use their instruments to hold out the mic to the audience. And like, how far, and like, all right, their challenge is how far can you push us to level up the song? And yeah, like you said, that I've heard some Wild Gins over the years, and that was a pretty standard one. But it was just the fact that we were having this conversation with the band musically is what made it special.
That's why you have attendance bias for it, because the feeling of being there makes it special. Totally. I feel like the next two songs were kind of a cool down, even though they weren't. Well, the first one, Nellie Kane, is good bluegrass, some more spotlight time for Mike. And then they really slow it down purposefully with Army of One, which is a song that I like very much. I assume it's about Paige's divorce at the time. At least that's what I think. It's hard to find so far a place to play it where the audience would be excited to hear it. I feel like this is largely seen as a bathroom break for a lot of people, but there's such good musicality here. A great piano solo at 2 minutes. And for anyone listening, if you haven't checked out the lyrics of Army of One, and if you've ever been through like a really harsh breakup, it's a good one. It's worth reading through.
I mean, I'm always good at holding my bladder to the set, like, because I don't want to be like something crazy that happened and I missed it, because you never, like, especially after Baker's Dozen, where Long Boy became a 30-minute jam, like, I want to be like, you'd be the one that missed something like that. So I feel like one day something like they're just gonna pick Army of one day, and then also that piano solo is gonna be like 5-10 minutes long. It's kind of like one of Brett's songs. Eventually they're gonna find the right spot for it. And same thing with Road. It just takes one version to crack that song open for a lot of other people.
And the next two were really standard, but what makes Phish. They played My Friend, which is a pretty standard version. I still get a little tickle when they pull off that craziness of that, ascent. I don't know what other word to call it, that madness. And then Cities, which had a great crowd reaction. Like, this is one of the songs that made me feel like I was there. The crowd singing along is great. There's a little jam at 5 minutes, and it was kind of this mind meld that seems to break through almost always during Cities. Like, you can't really tell who is guiding it or if anyone is. It's like this great democratic jamming. And then this was a recurring theme I heard throughout the show, is that the whole band gets super quiet and just creates this bed of music, and they just build on top of each other. They don't necessarily get louder, but they get more dense, and then they just kind of fold down. They kind of melt into Bowie.
Yeah, I do remember that moment you're talking about. It's almost like they made sound physical.
Yeah.
Like I could reach out and just like hold the sound that they were creating in the palm of my hand. I remember trying to do that, even like reaching out. Like, that's how potent that jam on City was. This, like, it had this physical essence to it, and again, it made me, even though I was like, they were very small from my viewpoint, it made me feel like I was there on stage with them, because I could walk across the sound to them because it was so dense.
It's the best when that happens, and for whatever reason, Cities is a great vehicle for that. I love that feeling. To me, it says summer. It says outdoor show in the summer, this jam in Cities, but they do melt into Bowie. And I have nothing negative to say about this Bowie per se. Nothing really stood out to me too much, but I might have been in the wrong, because it is listed on the Phish.net jam charts, and I'd love to hear your opinion. It's this is the opinion of the editors of Phish.net. They wrote, in from Cities, a very solid and interesting Bowie that shifts back and forth between minor and major modes several times. The upbeat jam contrasts nicely with the more classic version from December 28th, 2012, which is a version we're done with Phish.net, but that's a version I don't know of. On the second listen, I heard a lot more interaction. But again, it's a great set closer, but nothing really grabbed me on this. Where were you at the end of this set?
I think walking back to my spot on the lawn after walking across the air during the city. Like I think I was just coming. It was a good come back to earth kind of moment for me, and I just love the riffs that come across from Trey during any Bowie, and it was a nice sing along, and again, it was just I remember getting the sense, okay, this is the end of the set, because sometimes you never know when the set's going to end. Wow, I just remember basking at mostly at Page. I remember shouting, "Page is the MVP of this set." Like he just was really coming across in every song. I remember that feeling. And again, I've been saying this whole podcast, basking in the joy of this whole set and being in such a loving crowd. Like you could just feel everyone's love for it, and everyone was staying put too. I've been at Phish shows where when people know it's the last song, they start heading for the bathroom break. But I just remember people being very stationary, like they were not leaving their spot until the band was done, because they just wanted to be with the boys through every song. There was no big lines for the bathroom during any song during this set, and
that's incredible.
Like people were just trapped in this joy.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode.
Set 2.
We come back. Set 2 begins with Energy by the Apples in Stereo, which is another debut. I don't know much about this song or about the Apples in Stereo at all, but it sure sounds like the crowd doesn't either. I liked it a lot, but do you remember what the reaction was like at the time? It sounds like people were confused.
Yeah, I remember having sort of the reaction like, the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Apart from my language, but and I remember just looking around, everyone had the similar almost like the expression is it raining? Like what is they didn't know what to make of it. And then the song builds and they're like, all right, let's see where this goes. I think they're still kind of dazed and confused by the end of it. So they're like, I remember turning to the person and saying, where is this set going? Like, what? I've never heard this Phish song. And then they said, that's not a Phish song. And so we're kind of, everyone's just, I remember there was just this buzz of confusion surrounding it after that first song.
Yeah, that sounds about right for any debut. And let's not forget, just a couple of months later, about 3 months later or so, 3.5, they would debut a whole set, an album's worth of new music right at Halloween this year. So this idea of constant, that feeling would not be new to the Phish crowd, but this song Energy has kind of become, first, like you mentioned, confusing to fans, and then it's become kind of a rarity that people want them to play it because it's led to a lot of good jams. So everywhere has to start somewhere, like you said with Yarmouth Road.
Yeah, and I've heard some great energies over the years, and I'm sad that I don't see in setlist that much anymore. But I know just probably within the next couple years, all of a sudden I'll start coming back randomly.
Yeah.
Whenever the band decides to fuck with us again.
But after Energy is a very familiar song. They played Light, which to me is probably the jam of the show. I've said on this podcast 100 times, this isn't my favorite song, but it always leads to the best jams. It starts with a little bit of noodling, and it gets a little off track, like amelodic. So I'm still here listening and just kind of hedging my bets. I'm not sure. Am I in on this one? And am I not? I'm just going to keep listening and let it develop. And then around 5.5 minutes or 6 minutes, the whole band joins in on this weird amelodic dissonant vibe, and there's a huge crowd swell. I could tell because I wasn't the only one who wasn't listening, obviously, at the time. Everyone was listening. And things become rhythmic, led by Paige and Trey. You mentioned Paige as the MVP. It really starts developing. And then by the 8-minute point, Fishman is nailing down this jam where it's like bump, bump, like over and over again. And the band connects to this rhythm, almost like Split Open and Melt. And it wasn't long before I stopped taking notes and just listened.
Yeah, and that's that's what the crowd was like. They like the first few minutes of Light, we were still processing energy, but then once that rhythm you said started kicking in, like it's like the joy all of a sudden like snapped back into existence, and people start dancing in their happy hippie little dance, and like we were really feeling it. Like I remember someone shouting, "There they are!" Like, It's like the band disappeared during energy, and then all of a sudden, like they turned on the light, so to speak, and then all of a sudden there's the band we recognize, and then I remember just the energy of that whole jam just building, and then I do strongly remember Fishman's bit, just like really like man, they really turned up the drums on the mics, and it just. He just got into this pocket that just, I think, got everyone really happy again. And then the set really took off from Fishman's little pocket. And it was like the show got back on track.
Yeah, what I liked about the end of Light also is it sounded like they were going to finish the song. Like there were hints that they were going to go back into Light and then finish it. But instead, Paige is on the keyboard and it turns into this very quiet and slow outro melody, which eventually develops into the Mango song. But I like that they didn't go back to end it purposefully, that they just kind of let it fall into wherever it went. And then when they played the Mango song, it's kind of like a can't lose. Like everybody loves the Mango song. and then 46 Days, which is the big rock one. You know, everything from here on in is great. I loved the whole rest of the show from Light onward.
Yeah, and it's just like they found a groove, and then 46 Days, like it's like reaching out to the audience again, and like, all right, we tricked you with energy. Now we're gonna give you what you asked for, and it's just you never know with this band with their energy felt like. I remember after the show, people talking like energy just felt like a gag, like. That wasn't a real song. Like we were arguing, was that even a real song? Like, do we just imagine it? Because the rest of that set was just so good. It just again the joy just came right back, and people were singing again, just having a real good time off that Light jam, and then we were all stopping to 46 Days, and you could almost feel Trey smiling during 46 Days, like. Like he had us right where he wanted us. Like he was definitely the leader during 46 Days. I felt like really just like hitting the audience just with the right notes with his guitar.
Yeah, definitely. I thought during 46 Days at about 4 minutes when the guitar solo starts and the crowd is loving it. The part that you're probably hearing in your mind, like that. This is not. I had the thought that this is not the jam night. This is the party night. But then I shouldn't have said that because about 6.5 minutes, everything breaks down. And this became a recurring theme where they would go from a loud peak to very quiet and then build back up again. But the crowd starts clapping along. And all of a sudden, it's not just Phish on stage anymore. It's the whole audience is physically part of the show. And the clapping along kind of leads the band into a groove that becomes Steam with a very smooth transition.
Exactly. And this is why out of the 9 shows I've been to, this one always stands out to me is because like, usually I feel like we're just listening to the band jam, but it's like we were improvising with them. Like I said earlier, egging the boys on, and it was like the band was acknowledging the crowd, how the crowd was helping them find these peaks. It was Trey's turn to wink at the audience, and then in the first set it was Paige and Mike's bass bombs that were winking at the audience. There was just this appreciation for the fact that we were allowed to participate, because a lot of Phish song lyrics are like appear to be like nonsense lyrics, or the meaning is hard to grasp, but the instrumentation is always, I think, the heart of the band, and it's always their way of like holding out the mic. And it just felt during 46 Day, that guitar solo, I remember just like it was Trey like reaching out and saying, "How you doing?"
Well, it seemed like everyone was doing all right during Steam. What I liked about this version is it slowly raises in intensity. What I thought about was that common metaphor of the lobster in the boiling pot, that they're modifying what they're playing in Steam, but there's no real leader, kind of like Cities, actually, now that I'm saying it out loud. It's like an example of layering without an intense buildup. It's like by the end, around 10 minutes of Steam, you don't realize how intense things got because it happened so gradually and piece by piece.
Exactly. And that's why Steam stands out to me even more than Lights, because like I remember like being like drenched in sweat by the end of 46 Days, and I'm like, I need water, but I don't want to leave my spot. Like almost like I was crying out to the band, like, help! And all of a sudden hear that they just brought down the whole temperature of the venue with steam, and it's like and then I wasn't thirsty anymore. Like I was able to cool off during that entire jam.
And
it's like they were aware that they were wearing us out, so they cooled us down.
Yeah, of course. They're always aware of it. And Steam, though, they're only going to cool you off for so long because they go right into Drowned, which is one of my favorite covers that they play, because anyone who knows this show knows that I'm a big fan of The Who. And this heralded back to a very famous version of this song that they played at SPAC on June 20th, 2004, during one of their last
I love
runs.
That version.
Yeah. So that was one of the first.
I have that on my phone right now.
Nice. That was one of the first things I thought when Page started playing this intro. And when they started playing it, this one is a little bit, I'll take any criticism, but a little bit more cohesive than that one. This one, the trade-off I love between Page and Trey, there's about 6 minutes. Fishman then joins in. And everyone, again, this is another example of this. Everyone kind of drops out. And then I love this jamming style where it happens during this show where everyone quiets down, one band member typically searches for a little, and then everyone jumps back in. Like even Drowned gets super quiet at about 9 minutes. And I don't know how many versions of this song you could say that about.
Yeah, usually it's just like a lot of high notes in a Drowned jam, and they're like, I think they were just appreciating the effect they had on the atmosphere of the venue. So, like I said, like we've talked about through this podcast, like, it's almost like they were making sound physical this night, and I think it was just they were really showing like appreciation for the energy of the place, and it's. They were just leaving space for the audience to breathe, and then like they jump right back into the high notes, and it was just that cohesiveness between the band and the audience was just very potent, especially at this point in the set.
Yeah, we're pretty much toward the end of the set because Drowned, like I just said, they played very quietly, and you mentioned it too, that they space out at the end for a good 2 minutes. It's not just like a 30-second transition where Trey's walking around and telling every other band member what's coming next. Like they're truly searching in a good way. Like, it's not boring. It's just kind of on the edge of your toes. And they found themselves enslaved to the traffic light. And my first thought was, if you're going to play this style where everyone drops down to nothing and then builds back up, why not play the song that's going to best benefit from this style?
Yeah, because the whole night was just this peaks and valleys, and I was hoping that they would jump into maybe Julius or something like that. I remember thinking that like Julius is next, and I tried to manifest it in my mind. And then we got Traffic Light. I'm like, okay, I'll accept this, but I don't remember Traffic Light really sticking out too much because I was still coming down from Steam, and I were just sitting on the lawn at this point, like in awe of the whole experience.
Yeah, I think we've all been there, especially at SPAC, just sitting down on the lawn, letting it soak in even before the show is over. And so that ends the set. Slave to the Traffic Light does. And then they come back on for the encore. You were hoping for Julius, but it's just like Julius's cousin, Character Zero, they play instead, which is like an exclamation point on if I still consider this the rock show, in quotes, this is the perfect encore for it. How were you feeling at this point at the end? Were you exhausted? Were you enthralled? All of the above?
I think all the above. I like Zero a lot. It's a good way to rock out the end of the show. And I think I just felt like everyone was like, all right, one last hurrah here, and then we go back to the campgrounds and continue the party and then wait for the next night. And I just remember the joy just elevating through this rug. Like everyone was just, this is the last gasp of joy that we have in our bodies, and it felt the same from the band. And just like we just met one last time, and then everyone just walked out of the venue with big smiles on their face. I remember just a lot of smiles on, like talking about how good the show was, and can't wait for tomorrow night. Like, what are they going to do tomorrow night?
But Sam, thank you so much for coming on to Attendance Bias to talk about July 5th, 2013 at Saratoga. It was a pleasure hearing about it after listening to it, because you were able to verbalize what I felt just listening to it 10 years later. You know, all that joy, all that enthusiasm and excitement in the crowd. Anyone listening to this episode, you should go on phish.in and listen to it from an audience recording perspective, because that would make Sam's comments and Sam's description fit a little bit better, in my opinion, than a soundboard would. So Sam, thank you again for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm always happy to come back and talk about other Phish-related topics, because it was a lot of fun reliving that show with you this morning. So thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Cheers.
And that's it for today's conversation with Sam Huber. And today we have just a very short attendance bias fact check.
Attendance bias fact check.
Sam said that his first Phish show was in Camden in 2011. More specifically, the date was June 10th, 2011. The band played a number of surprises and fan favorites, including a Mike's Groove in the first set, The Curtain With, Guela Papyrus, Big Black Furry Creatures from Mars, Steep into Swept Away, and a Bold as Love encore, and much more. As far as Sam's most recent show, setlist research suggests that it was either June 28th or 29th, 2016, since the band did not play the Mann Music Center in 2017. The 25-minute version of Fuego that Sam refers to was played on July 8th, 2014 at the Mann. The version is on the Phish.net jam charts and officially clocks in at 25 minutes and 56 seconds. At the time of this recording, Energy by the Apples in Stereo has been played 9 times by Phish. The first time was at this show, July 5th, 2013, and most recently at the time of this recording, August 14th, 2022 at Alpine Valley. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Sam Huber for joining me today, Phish.net for its help with the fact check, and Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show by leaving a rating and a review of it on your favorite podcast app. You can also go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate anything you can to help keep the show in production. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.